Welcome, everybody. All Access Coaches Corner. We have a super special edition. Anytime you have a former player on that's doing big things, it's like Christmas. So it's Christmas Day. Today we have former player, 3-point specialist, hair stylist guru, swag extraordinaire, my main man, EJ Kusnyer, who is now one of the rising stars in the agent game. I'll let him tell all about that part of the story. I was blessed to coach him in junior college. He went on to play junior college at Collin County Community College for the legend, the Godfather, Jim Sagona. Got to give him his props. And look, Coach will probably have some good stories for us. We'll let him open if he wants to share something. But he was our tied leading scorer on that team. We had a good team. He went on to play at Mercer and had a great career there where he was second in the country in 3-point field goals made. He missed it by one. He'll tell us about that too. And then he went on to be a pro player as well, and now he's doing great things in the agent game. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, EJ Kusnyer.
Thanks for having me, man. I always saw myself as more of a defensive specialist, athlete, but I'll take 3-point specialist.
Yeah, I think the defensive specialist was definitely how you saw it. I don't know if anybody else saw it that way. And the athlete part, if they knew about your workouts in the field at Collin County in the grass that you did at 5 a.m., then they probably would maybe consider you to be an athlete.
No, absolutely. I mean, look, I tried, right? I tried to figure it out.
You definitely figured it out, man. Got everything. One of those guys that got everything out of his ability and then some. I don't think anyone projected him to be a pro. I think we actually found out about EJ via email, which we all get those emails as college coaches, and most of the time it's like, nah, this guy can't play. But EJ was a Division I transfer from Centenary College, actually where my older brother went to school and played for Billy Kennedy. So I was familiar. So when I saw that email, it actually stuck out to me. And then we started having a conversation. EJ came up, and he was actually like a real player. It wasn't a setup. So, yeah. So anyway, let's tell the people, who is EJ Kusnyer.
I was born and raised in outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Did a year of prep school in New Jersey at the Petty School before signing at, like you said, Centenary College in Louisiana. Spent 2 years there, 1 year as a Coug at Collin County, 2 years at Mercer, and then embarked on a 5-year professional career. I'm now an NBA agent. We also have an NFL side of our company as well, 4 children, and so a father, husband, and just looking to basically take my experiences and apply it to, give back to guys that are coming behind me.
Yeah, such an amazing thing how life works. You've grown up in the basketball industry since you were a kid, so you've been exposed to understanding the value of relationships. I don't know if there's anybody better that I know to be an agent because of understanding the value of genuine and real relationships, and then follow through and doing real work. So I think you model that, and that's why you've been able to climb the way you have. Talk about a little bit of just whatever you want to touch on. Give some props to your dad, of course, your brother who's a player as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think I started with my parents. I mean, my dad was in the shoe industry for close to 30 years with Converse and Adidas. So I think from an early age, like people always joke with me that, I had my master's in sports management by the time I was 12, just because I was going everywhere with my dad, McDonald's All-American games, Kentucky, Indiana All-Star game, NBA All-Star games, Major League Baseball, World Series, just around athletes. My uncle was in Major League Baseball for almost 50 years too, as a coach and player. So I was just exposed to that side of the world basically my entire life. That's what I got to see my dad do on a daily basis. My uncle and was able to pick up things that I thought was normal at the time. But looking back on it, it was like I was really getting a crash course in sports management, sports marketing. I never imagined that I would be an agent, just because even when I was a player, I didn't necessarily like agents. But once I kind of came to the realization that all the reasons I didn't like agents was a reason why I could be somebody that helped guys and be able to do, kind of what I saw my dad do. And I think I look at my parents as my parents were, uh, kind of my original agents, because my path to getting to where I wanted to go was different. And their guidance and encouragement, those two things combined, helped me realize my dream of being a Division I basketball player. And there were plenty of times during that path when other people didn't think that was possible. It's like, hey man, give it up. Right. So when you're in high school, I had best offers I had was Division III. I said, I'm going to prep school. Everybody's like, just go D3. With the prep school, best offer you have is D2. Just take the D2 offer. I'm out playing the summer circuit as a 19-year-old. Everybody's like, what are you doing? I got my Division
Right.
I offer. And then I get to
I
get to Division I, and um, it wasn't the best situation or the best fit. So I had the red shirt and figure out another path. It was either transfer to a Division II or go junior college, and that's how I'm sending out emails. So probably the beginning of my agent career right there was my move from Centenary, and what I learned through that process is that you got to put in the work and reach out and be proactive, but then you also got to follow it up. You got to show up at the gym and hoop. And I think that's the same thing that if we're comparing it to the industry that I'm in now, it's like there's a lot of work to be done, but a lot of this comes down to the player as well.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, you touched on a little bit of it, but I didn't know, of course, EJ, when he graduated high school, only having a Division III offer, but I'm not all the way surprised. I would say self-made is one of the best compliments I think sometimes you can get. And you were a self-made player who made yourself into what you were. And even when you first got to us, and I know there's always that nervousness of he was Division I, we got to get him back to Division I,
Yeah.
but it just you never stopped working at what you did. And even when you got to Mercer, same thing. It's like, okay, he's Division I, but is he gonna go? Is he gonna play? Is he gonna play a lot? Is he gonna play a big role? And to be a starter and have the kind of success that you had, and then it's like nobody was thinking probably, and I don't mean myself, of course, because obviously we're biased when you coach somebody, but you don't always know where somebody's gonna go unless you kind of just tap into what's in them or pay attention to what's in them.
Yeah.
And those people, from my experience, that have that in them, that will work at it and put in the time and figure out whatever. Because I think part of how you became a pro was because of your connectability to people, right? Your relationship. And what people don't understand, and you can kind of touch a little bit on this, to become a pro, it's not just because it's not like in high school where you get recruited and then you just go become a pro. Like you have to have an ability to network and market yourself, because now you are your own agent until you get an agent. You are your own business. You are your own brand. So I had a feeling that once you finish playing, EJ is going to end up doing some things professionally, and even how you figured out a niche to get professional and have a career. Most people may do it that are blessed to do it. They do it for a year, maybe two, but to have a 5-year career says a lot about your ability to kind of navigate that space. So as a self-made guy, as a worker, as a guy who follows through, as a guy who cares about relationships, how did you become a professional basketball player from a guy who coming out of high school only had a D3 offer?
Yeah, I think, it's cliche, but it's just consistency, right? So you have to set your kind of like your eyes and your work on a target, and you've got to be willing to. I think the greatest thing that like I tell people is that I had so much experience going with adversity and overcoming outside voices. So when so many people saying you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, sometimes it can be overwhelming, and sometimes you give into that. For me, it was like, well, listen, I'm going to put in the work, and I'm going to give myself every single opportunity I can. And ultimately, if it doesn't work out, at least I know that I did everything that I possibly could to control this situation, and it didn't work out. Right? If no Division I team wants to give me a scholarship offer, didn't mean that I didn't get in front of enough people. Didn't mean that I didn't put in the work. It just meant that I wasn't good enough, or it wasn't meant to be. That this was not going to be my path. But I didn't want to have any regrets. I think in life, regret is like poison. And for me, it's like if I knew that I had done everything that I could, and like you said, kind of squeezed everything out of it, then I would be okay. I'd be able to go to bed at night, and I wouldn't be, 50, 60 years old down the line being one of those guys that said, I could have or I should have. It's like, no, I would be comfortable saying that, yeah, hey, I did everything in my power and did everything that I could to reach, the goals and aspirations that I had from a young age.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'll say this too, like going back to like my dad, it was like he played professional basketball. He was in the sports industry. I was around so much of this stuff, so I did have an advantage where, as a kid, like I'm doing drills and I'm like locked in from a young age because that was something he instilled in me. Is like, hey, if you want to get to this level,
Right.
then like you better be working because what you're surrounded by, in my suburban neighborhood, he's like, these people aren't trying to go the same place as you are. So you have to be different. You have to work at a different level. And the one story I'll share that I think propelled me that direction. I was 12 years old, thought I was nice. Had like 26, 28 in our league, semifinals. We're going to the finals. He
Right.
said, hey man, he's with Converse at the time. They're sponsoring the New York Gauchos. He said, hey man, we're going to New York this weekend. It was, yeah, we're going to New York. Cool. You're going to play with the Gauchos. We'll put you in the Gaucho gym. I'm going to go over, in the Bronx. And basically it was one of those situations where I walk in the gym and that was an experience because, I got cooked. I mean, that was a weekend where like I'm getting pressed, dudes in me. And the one thing I did realize was like, okay, I can shoot, right? I can't do anything. Like my level, my handles, all this other stuff is not up to par, right? And I realized like, okay, all these guys have the same dream and goal as me. This is who I'm competing against. These are the guys that want the Division I scholarships, want to be pro basketball players. And so that changed my whole mindset to where my dad was smart enough where he had told me things and I wasn't listening. So it was like, all right, I'm not going to tell you. I'm just going to show you. And then you're going to do with that adversity, you're going to go one of two ways. You're going to crumble or you're going to realize, okay, I need to be better.
Yep. I love it. I love it. Yeah, I've always known you to be a winner. I think that's just kind of it can be an overused word sometimes, but to understand as a competitive athlete how important overcoming adversity, I think every coach that's a winning coach and championship coach, they always talk about it. They know how important that is. But to embody that in life is a huge, huge component to success. And so obviously you've seen that early. Shout out to Papa Kush, great dude. Love him. Yeah, he instilled that early, and I think that if we can kind of segue into you becoming an agent, I think that is a huge resiliency factor of what makes you who you are. Is that resilience to not only just keep pushing when adversity comes, but just have a spirit of like, I'm gonna get the most out of this situation. I don't know what it looks like. I know I'm gonna have to go through some stuff. I don't care. You've kind of always been a guy who's kept your eye on a prize and been so locked in and fixated and just like, I'm gonna do the work. No one's gonna outwork me on that, and I'm never gonna look back and say I left anything left to that I could have done. So tell people how hard it is to get into the agent game because it sounds cool, like, oh, I'm an agent, and not only
Yeah.
to get in, but then to be able to make a name and find yourself because there's a lot of different reputations with agents too and connotations,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
You have to find your lane within that. So tell a little bit about the journey to becoming an agent and how you found your lane.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. I love my job just because like again, like I'm able to empower players, and I think that's the biggest thing is this industry for decades has been a situation where agents walk in the door and say, you need me. But the reality of it is, we know this, whether you be a coach or whether you be an agent, whatever you're in, like the player is the most important piece to this, right? You're a
Yeah.
better coach when you have better players. You're a better agent when you have better players. It's just a
Yep.
fact. Um, so for me, it was okay. I want to get into this, but I want to be able to do it my way. Like I don't want to attach myself to the machine, so to speak, right? I want to be able to help guys, and I want to align myself with people that have the same vision, right? To change the game, right? And that's a big ask because you're going against companies that have a lot of resources, they have a lot of history, they have long client lists, um, and when you're dealing with young athletes, especially, it's like you're coming in the door, and there is still that fear factor. They don't know that they're the ones. I mean, now in 2020, like we're starting to have this, where players are more empowered, right? They're realizing their power.
Yep.
And that's something that I set out from the jump is like, hey, people talk about power agents, like a power agent, where does the power come from? Right? It comes from the players that they represent. So early on, instead of attaching myself to kind of the status quo, I worked for a smaller agency starting off, but I was not getting paid any money, straight commission, but I was teaching and I was waiting tables. So I'm taking phone calls in the back of BJ's Brew House, in between in between serving pizzas uh, and drinks and food, and but that was all part of it too. Going back to like my playing career is like being able to know, hey, I'm doing everything that I need to do to keep this thing going, right? And it's got to be consistent, consistent, consistent. And then had another company that honestly was the wrong fit, working for the wrong guy, and the bottom fell out, right? And then now you're back again. I'm driving Uber and Lyft because I got to put food on the table and I got to pay my mortgage and yeah, I got to look after my family, and I'm taking calls from GMs in the middle, right before I'm picking somebody up in an Uber, um, and to now to where we have Beyond Athletes Management, which is now, we've had it for over 2 years, and just extremely blessed to be in the situation, working with some great partners and ultimately great athletes. I think that's the thing that people need to understand is that you to do this you've got to build a brand, know who you are as an agent and as a person, and then you need to find those athletes that fit that brand because it's not every player is meant for every agent, not every agent is meant for every player.
Yep. Very good. Very well said. Tell us a little bit about Beyond Athlete Management for those that don't know. Tell us a little bit about what makes it what it is.
Yeah, I mean, founded in 2000, like I said, 2018, and our goal has been to disrupt the sports industry, to disrupt the status quo. Our tagline is kind of like own your talent. And our thing is going and saying to these players, being like, okay, um, you have power, right? And we're here to come alongside of you, be your team, to be your board, so to speak. You're the LLC, you're the business. But like, what are we doing? What are you doing for your community, right? What are you doing for your brand? Do you have a logo? What is when people see that logo, what feeling do they get? So how do we develop that? Um, how are how are you dealing with everything that's going on? Like, how's your mental health? How are you processing things? Like just little things, little details. And a lot of that comes from the things that I wish I had when I was a player playing professionally. Is just someone coming alongside and being able to help you through every step. And it changes with guys, right? So as guys become, go further along in their career, then you have different needs than maybe the guy that is just starting off. So if you're a rookie, there's a great deal of um, you know a process that goes into that, right? And education and helping them learn. Because my thing is like I want these guys to know everything, right? Understand contracts, understand the business, um, break it down for them so that when we're having discussions and we're talking through things, that it's more a partnership than it is, me telling them what to do. Um, it's a collaborative, collective deal.
What's the great stuff, Kush? Thanks so much, man. Where does servant leadership play a role in this whole thing, and where does your faith personally, as a person, as a man, as a leader, as a big part of this company, where does that all play into your approach with how you go about it? You've kind of touched on it with making it
Yeah.
about the player, which I think is different than even the old model. The old model of coaching and of probably agent is like, look, you need me. I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to do that for you. And you can't do this stuff almost without me. Versus now, a little bit of what you're touching on is, hey, you're the talent. Let's figure out how to maximize and get you to a place that maybe you can't get otherwise because we're helping you, because we're serving you. So talk about that servant leadership and even your personal faith.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think for me, like I was telling one of our guys the other day, is just that, um, part of like my morning routine is praying, just general, my family, players, just general list of things, right? And what I was saying to him is that like, especially during this uncertain time, right? So he's an NBA free agent. So, you can imagine that there's a lot of like unknowns, fear, anxiety, all these things that are kind of creeping in. And it's for me, I feel those things too. And is being able to say and lead in a way and say that there's certain things that we cannot control, right? There's certain things that just we've got to go to God and look for guidance and be able to figure out, um, and understand that we've got to be able to pivot and not feel like we can control everything, because I think when you start to feel like you control everything, that's when things can ultimately spin out of control. And I honestly believe that some of the greatest mistakes that agents make is they're constantly trying to justify their existence. So sometimes they overdo it, and sometimes they let that idea of like I'm in control of everything affect the client detrimentally. It becomes a bad thing. Whereas if you are approaching it with a peace, and you are approaching it with an understanding of like control what you can control, that you're more likely to get better results.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk about momentum. So momentum, and you guys are 2 years
Mhm.
in. Obviously, you've built momentum in your career. I believe there was at one point in time, correct me if I'm wrong, a USA Today article about your kind of climb through the agent ranks. Is that
Yeah, yeah.
correct?
So see, New York Times article. There it is on the wall.
Yeah, there we go. There we go.
Yeah, no, it was done. Yeah, basically, it just talked about the process of becoming an NBA agent. And I want to say that the article basically depicts that year, like I think 164 people were trying to become agents or took the exam, and out of those, like 164, 10 of them actually ended up representing NBA players.
Wow.
Um, so I
Wow.
think it's a business that a lot of people want to get into, but it is highly competitive. And you do have certain companies that have a majority of the players. So you're trying to break in and um, really establish yourself. And to me, again, it just comes back to that consistency, right? Is that to the point where the first player that I signed, I did a deal overseas was for $27,000. Okay, and now we're about to have 5, 6 NBA players this year, 4 NFL guys. Um, but that was a process. But it was a process of being diligent and being consistent, right? So treating those guys the same way that you would treat an NBA player, right? Because the greatest thing you can have in any business is word of mouth, right? It's like if I'm going to be this agent for this NBA player, I should still be this agent for this guy that's making $27,000 a year as a rookie overseas. And the reality of it is sometimes you have guys that start off as $27,000 guys, and they end up moving up and being EuroLeague players or even NBA players. We've had guys that have come from Europe or come internationally and make the NBA. So I think it boils down to that consistency. And at the end of the day, guys just want to know you care. They want to
Right.
know you care. And that's what I wanted. I just wanted to know that, if you're representing me, that you care, that all the work and all the time and all the energy that's been put into this, and that this has been a lifelong dream to be a professional. So just I understand that, no one's going to care about us more than us ourselves. But I wanted it to be close, and I want these guys to feel that too. Like I want them to be able to feel like, hey, you got somebody that's in your corner, that's going to be there for the highs and for the lows. My college coach, shout out Coach Hoffman. It's one thing he used to always say too, is just like we don't need to get too high, we don't need to get too low. We need to be like right here, in the
Yep.
middle, be consistent. And that's where I come into play with guys, is like trying to balance that, the highs and lows, as I'm going through it too, because I'm riding that wave with them because
Right.
of all the investment and the time and the energy that I'm putting into it. And I'm now done being a professional player, so I know what it's like to be on the other side.
Yep.
And it sucks, it's tough, right? You get one sweet window to do this, so I take that into account. I'm saying, okay, how can I make this career extend as long as possible? And then what are we going to do beyond your career? Hence how we came up with the name Beyond Athlete Management is, we want you to play as long as you can, make as much money, have as many experiences of success as you can, and use those to kind of catapult you to your next endeavor.
Right. And I think the beyond also kind of speaks to this is bigger than just being your agent. This is beyond that, right? We go above
Yeah.
and beyond, and this goes beyond just you inside the lines. This goes beyond just your career while you're playing. So I think there's a lot of different things that go kind of within that beyond. What would you say, in your words or you guys' words, what is the differentiator when you're sitting down with um, a big time, you're having your home visit or your Zoom visit or whatever it is now with a potential person that may sign with you or someone else, and then maybe it's a competitive battle.
Mm.
Obviously, as a former college coach, we've done the recruiting battles. You, as a former pro and college player, have done the competitive battles in the lines. What does that competitive agent battle look like, and how do you guys differentiate yourselves from others? And I know there's a part of it you touched on already about the fit, right? You have to make sure you have the right fit. So sometimes you may decide, like in college recruiting, like, hey, this guy doesn't fit our program. That's okay. He's a really good player. We wish him well. But how do you guys separate and have differentiators within kind of that competitive field?
Yeah, well, touching on that, like that's the first thing, right? Is identifying the right guys to recruit. Is this a fit, right? And sometimes, like you talk about the competitiveness, is sometimes you get so caught up in the recruiting battle that you want to win that you actually end up losing because maybe it's you spend too much money on the recruiting process. Maybe it's you spend too much time on the recruiting process. And then maybe you win the recruiting process and it's not the right guy. It's not a fit. He's not a beyond guy.
Right.
And so now you're having to deal with again all these things that um, you didn't anticipate. And I learned that thankfully my first year. I had two guys that just it was no matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked, it wasn't good enough. And it was like, I don't want to do this. I'm getting calls at 2, 3 in the morning, guys getting arrested overseas, stuff like that, where it's like, okay, this I don't want this to be my life. And I'm in control of who I choose to work with. So that's the first thing is being able to identify is this somebody that would fit with Beyond and fit with the culture. um, and then the second thing is asking questions, right? Identifying like, okay, what is the need of this player? 'Cause I think a lot of times people step in the room and want to talk about themselves or say all the things that they think that the player needs. But what do you need? Where do you see yourself? Um, where do you see yourself in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? And understanding their expectations, and then customizing uh, the pitch or the recruitment to that, and helping these guys understand too that the agent game is changing, and that it used to be where the NBA, the max you can charge is 4%. What's like accountability? Like, where's that 4% going? So if you're paying 4% on your NBA contract, which now these contracts used to be back in the day, you may have needed to charge 4% to keep your business running, but now it's like these contracts, average NBA contracts, over $9 million a year. So if you're charging 4%, like where is that 4% going? How's that broken down? What are you doing for me? I mean, yes, you're representing me. You're doing a contract. That's important. But what are the other things you're doing? How are you investing in me? What's the plan? And that comes down to getting with the player and saying, what are you passionate about? What do you want to do? Building content, brand building, connecting in the community. Those are, now we have all these tools, social media, where, you don't have to be on a commercial. I mean, commercials still exist. The commercials, that kind of stuff is usually limited to, top 10, 15 guys in a sport. But now it's like if you have the right strategy and the right content, and you have a built-in platform where the people that are following you, are some level, right? I mean, they followed you for a reason. Um, so that may be you know again, like depending on the athlete, how are you tapping into that, but also like how are you giving to those people as well, or how are you attaching yourself, how are you making yourself um, more real to them, how are you reaching them,
Right.
and how are you providing them value, right? Which in turn, it's the whole give and then ask, um, from a business perspective. So just helping guys like think about those things, understand those things. And some guys don't want stuff too. Some say, hey man, just once you represent me, do my contract. I don't want to do all that stuff.
Right.
Other guys want to do everything, where you got to be like, okay, listen, there's going to be layers to this, right? Because like the first thing is like you need to be in the NBA or the NFL and established before we do some of this stuff. Because if you're so caught up in doing all this other stuff, and then you're not in the NBA or the NFL,
Right, right,
then it then doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, that is the most important thing. And for majority of guys, like, that's going to be the that's going to be the thing that brings in, the most money, and that's the thing that's going to be able to bring generational wealth, is
yep,
playing part of it. Now there's some guys obviously that are making more money, uh, maybe off the court than they are on, but those are your mega superstars.
right, right, right. Let's touch on this kind of a lightning round. Just if you had to say 30 seconds to a minute, I'll kind of give you a topic. Just kind of share some stuff on it. What's a misconception about agents? 30 seconds to a minute.
Well, I don't think there's a misconception. I think it's true. A lot of these guys are trying to take from these players, and they have so many guys that they're running through it. They're playing a numbers game. So if a certain amount of guys hit, then we as an agency, we win, and we can sell the guys that made it, and the guys that didn't make it, like, oh well. And so that's where we're stepping in and saying, like, okay, no, we can't represent every single player, but we believe that if we represent the players we believe in the way that we believe they should be represented, then it makes everybody around us have to raise the bar. So that scene from Jerry Maguire where, he's hugging Jerry, and the whatever quarterback's like, how come we don't have that kind of relationship? He like fake hugs him. Like,
Right.
that is the business. It's not a misconception. Like, agents, the name agent has a negative connotation for a reason, and I think that's why we set out to do our own thing.
Right. Very well said. Very well said. What's the misconception, or what would you say about how young players are tabbed as pros early, and why some guys make it, why some guys don't, that may have been tabbed or not tabbed as pros?
Yeah, I mean, similar to my story, I think you need to have the right encouragement. A lot of guys have fake finish lines, so like they feel like they've already made it. And the reality of it is like, once this becomes a business, they don't care where you were ranked, they don't care who AAU team you played for, they don't care what college you went to. The guy that's leading EuroLeague in scoring right now, which is the top league in Europe, is a Division II player. We're seeing it with Dame Lillard, and we're seeing it with CJ McCollum. We're seeing it with these guys that played at, low major schools that are now, NBA all-star level guys. It's like, at some point in time, it's like, if you're not consistent and you're not putting in the work and you're not constantly challenging yourself, you're not going to make it as a pro. I mean, if you go back and look, here's something that viewers should do is, and I can maybe even share it with you and you can share it with them, is I put together a spreadsheet from 2005 to current day. I wanted to know what McDonald's All-Americans made it to their second contract, what McDonald's All-Americans got drafted, where they got drafted, how much money they made. And it's staggering to see that the guys that didn't make it. And a lot of that, I believe, is because they were fed something or they were giving something that they didn't earn. Or, you're a pro when you're a pro, not before that. And I think that's something that gets lost. And you have a lot of people that are experts that just happen to be close to a good player. They're not actually experts. They actually don't know what they're talking about. And the misinformation is what misguides these kids and ultimately probably leads them down a path where they do face adversity. They've never had experience with it before, so they don't know what it is and they don't know how to handle it. And then it can't be their fault. And then ultimately, they're the guy that said, I should have been, I could have been. And they're in Europe or, slowly just kind of fading out.
Yeah, I think the fake finish lines, I love that concept, even though it's not necessarily a positive one, but it's a real one, right? Like, becoming a McDonald's All-American, you think like, oh, I'm a McDonald's All-American, I'm going to be a pro now. And that may be a fake finish line for somebody. Maybe it's something else. And I think the other part you touched on, the accountability. Sometimes it's hard for guys that are really highly touted, at whether it's out of college, whether it's out of high school, whatever it may be. And if there's not accountability within their circle, really hard for them to hear truth, and really hard for them to know where they really are, right? So talk about that truth. Talk about 30 seconds to a minute again, just kind of like being able to tell players the truth. Like, where does that really fit into the agent game and into the pro life?
Yeah, so like I'd say my job as an agent is to, obviously there's the negotiating part, but it's to deliver good information. And I tell people all the time, like, if the player, the agent, and reality aren't in alignment, it's not going to work. It's a relationship that will not work. So I think you have to start that relationship, start from the recruiting point of saying, I'm going to give you truth, I'm going to hold you accountable, and I'm going to give you good information. And we should be basing everything off of good information. And if you're going to sign with another agent because he's giving you bad information, well, you're going to remember that I gave you good information, because at some point in time, you're going to figure it out. And, for me, it's like, hey, I think my son is a first round pick, or I think I'm a first round pick. I'm like, hey, that's great. I may think he's a first round pick too. But if there's 30 teams that make those decisions. If one of those 30 teams doesn't think he's a first round pick, he's not a first round pick. And there's nothing we can do about it other than, hey, put a plan in to prove him wrong. NBA teams are wrong all the time. It's not something to get so hung up on, but it's like, you got to understand that this is a process, and you're going to be doubted, and you're going to have adversity. And how are we going to get through that? How are we going to put together a plan, and how are we going to set benchmarks too, where we say like, hey, is the plan working, or do we need to pivot, and do we need to change course? And I think when you approach people that way, you have the player and the agent, everybody has a much greater chance of success, because you establish those things, you establish a solid foundation from the beginning.
Yeah, big time. I love it. What about the what would you say, 30 seconds to a minute, about the evaluation process? Not so much the character part matters, so I don't want to leave that part out, but the basketball evaluation process, what goes into that? So similar as a college coach, we're going out to recruit. We see this guy has this ability. Is it about programs they come from? Is it about a winning background? Is it about a work ethic? Usually success leaves clues, right? And
Yeah.
usually there's a track record that says this guy this guy has indicators for success. What are those like on the pro level? Because obviously you're getting guys from other pro leagues. There's guys that have stories that have played overseas and then they come over. They got guys out of high school. You have guys coming from college that are 1 year, guys that maybe played in the G League. There's so many different pools to pull from. What's the evaluation process? And if you have to go longer than a minute, that's okay. But
Yeah, no, I mean, number one is the talent, right? Is watching a guy and saying like, is he good enough? And does he have an NBA skill? Like, is he elite at one thing? Because at the end of the day, you got your superstars, and then after you get past 3 or 4 guys on a roster, it starts being a bunch of guys that are really good at one or two things. And so, do they have an NBA skill? What is that NBA skill? And then you start doing the deep dive and understanding like, what are their habits like? Are they a hard worker? Do they have a good attitude? Are they coachable? All those little things that are going to be the deciding factor on a guy making the NBA, not making the NBA, getting cut in Europe, having a 10, 12, 13, 14 year career in Europe. And I think, for me, I gravitate guys like myself that have been like probably doubted or hated on a little bit, and have a chip on their shoulder. And if you look across the board, like that's kind of the guys that's who we have. We have Cortland Sutton's a Pro Bowl receiver, but it's like he had one offer out of high school to be a safety, and he's a Pro Bowl receiver.
right.
Miles Sanders, everybody talked about, oh, he's behind Saquon Barkley. Jay Sean Tate, who's a name that people are going to be very familiar with this year, but he's a 4-year starter at Ohio State, was one of the winningest players in program history, but it was like he quote unquote was a football player and couldn't shoot. And he's going to be an NBA player for a long time, but he had to go and prove that. And that's a perfect example of a guy where you say, hey, they say you're not an NBA player because you don't shoot it well enough, right? And you're only 6'4", where I'm like, man, I'm taking this guy. I'm watching him play. I'm thinking, I want this guy on my team. This guy's a winner. I don't care how big he is. Like, I don't know. He just does everything. What position is he? I don't know. He's a winner. I put him on the floor. He can play the 5. I put him at the 1, wherever. But the one thing people couldn't get past was he can't shoot, right? So he can't shoot. He can't make it. So it's like a guy like him could say like, well, screw them. I'm good enough. He was like, okay, I can't shoot. I'm gonna be relentless. Work on that shot. Guy shoots now his last 2 seasons over 40%, and now he's going to be in the NBA.
Yep.
It's again, he took that good information. Now the same people that said he should play football forgot that they said it. It's such a fickle crowd. Now they want to sign him to their team, and I'm like, I thought he was a football player. They're like, what are you talking about? He's not. What? They don't even remember that they said it.
Right.
It's like, so you can't even like get caught up on that and you have to instinctually also trust yourself, where you can't look at sometimes the mock drafts or look at the rankings. You gotta trust your gut and trust your eye. And uh it's not always right on, but most of the time I think me being around enough guys and being in locker rooms and watching basketball, you kind of get that instinct
Right.
um for who you want to work with, who you want to attach yourself to, and then figure out like how you maximize that.
And
And
it's almost like that coaching philosophy of we talk about as coaches, the who do you want to be in the alley with? Who do you not want to play against? Right?
yeah,
Like
exactly. Yeah.
there's into that. So I'm curious, two questions before we kind of wrap up today. And one is how much does being a former player and being in the trenches help you relate to players? Because I'm imagining there's not a lot of former players that are agents, right? So you're probably in a small percentage. So how much does that give you an advantage, relatability wise, and then also in evaluating, head coaches like to get guys that are going to represent their philosophy. They're going to Bobby Huggins is going to have guys that represent how he his mentality, right? Same as Frank Martin, same as anybody else, insert any coach name here, Kelvin Sampson, right? So it sounds like you're kind of doing that with your agency as well. So how much does your eye and your experience to evaluate talent or guys you would want to have played with, how does that play into? And then second question is how do you separate from the hype? Because you're in a world of hype. I mean, agency, pro life, it's all about the hype. So the two-part question is, how does your playing experience play in, and then how do you separate from the hype when you're doing what you do every day?
Yeah, I think from the playing experiences, I'm able to have empathy, right? I'm able to compare situations. And I think you have to be careful with it too, because I didn't play at the same level as most of these guys. So you have to be careful to not be the guy that like, when I was playing, but it's like, hey man, I went through a situation with a coach, or I went through a situation where I was doubted, or, and just kind of keep it quick. But just being able to show them and step into their shoes and say, hey, I've been on the other side, right? I've been a professional player. I've been in a certain in a situation like this before, and then here's how it turned out. Here's how I got through it. And sometimes I think it helps. Sometimes maybe it doesn't. But I think at the end of the day, guys kind of respect it. Like, okay, you've been through some of this stuff, and like you understand it. Um, you understand. And then as far as like the hype, I think look, I think it's again, you have to be consistent, and it's hard to not get caught up in that. But we're fortunate. We're like we laid a foundation where you know Josh Bostic is, a guy that's made a lot of money playing professional basketball. He's a Division II guy, came out of Findlay, but like that's a guy where it's like also like a high character guy. Ben Moore was our first NBA player, right? Nobody thought Ben was going to be an NBA player. Ben thought it, we thought it, but his work ethic matched that, and everybody in the SMU program said the same thing. That Ben Moore doing Ben Moore things is like the favorite thing to be able to say. So I think it
I
just
love
when you get those kind of guys, and Glenn Robinson the third. I mean, we're talking about like high character guys, Jay Sean Tate, um, that are guys that really are what you say they are. And I think when you start to get those types of guys, and then those guys have success, now all of a sudden you're looking at people now trust your word, and they identify beyond as okay, yeah, well, we don't want to be wrong again, because, Beyond's been right X amount of times. We have guys like Josh Gray, averaged 5 points a game as a senior in college, has played 2 seasons in the NBA, but it's like a worker, right? Like, I want to play in the NBA, and his work ethic matches it. So I'm like, I can get behind that. We can figure this out. I mean, so, I consider myself, um, really fortunate, man. We have guys that, you know, uh, You know, uh, Isaiah Hartenstein, another thing, man, guy that's been through some adversity, only 22 years old, and is like he's going to have an unbelievable NBA career. But again, it's because the thing I see in him is I'm like, okay, again, his work ethic and his actions match his goal. What he tells me where he's trying to go is also where like the work is there too. Um, and that's who I want to be as an agent. Is I want to represent those types of guys, man. That's where it's at. I don't want to get it caught up in the hype, because when you start dealing with the hype, you know, it becomes unfulfilling. And at the end of the day, I always tell people the average relationship between an NBA player and an NBA agent is 1.3 years. And it's
Wow.
because people chase the hype,
Yeah.
right? And players sign with agents for the wrong reasons, and agents recruit players for the wrong reasons too. So you put in all this work, put in all this effort, and then it ends up not being worth it. And a lot of times those guys don't make it, or you don't make it as an agent until that next deal.
Yep. Yeah, well said. I think the part I give so much credit to you on, and I think this goes especially at the pro level, college level, not as much, but really good players, they want to know, one, do you care, like you said?
Yeah.
Do you know what you're talking about,
You know
right?
what you're talking
Do
about,
you
right?
are you investing in your craft enough?
Yep.
Can you help me? Which is usually, do you know what you're talking about? And then, can I trust you? If you can kind of check those four boxes, usually you can go from there. But most of the time, those aren't the boxes that people are necessarily always looking to check when it comes to the hype, because you almost feel like a sense of invincibility, like, I'm gonna make it. I can sign with whoever. Or this guy's worked with, like you said, they tell you the story of the guys that have made it, but they don't tell you the stories of how many guys
Didn't make it.
kind of pushed by the wayside. So, yeah, definitely, I love everything that you shared on that, man. What would you say? Last kind of question, agent and basketball wise, what would you say is some legitimate advice that you would give, or perspective for whether it's a college coach listening for his good player that he would want to share, whether it's a parent listening and they would want their kid to really know some truth. Like, what is a truth that you would want people to know that are aspiring to be pros, and maybe they're already really successful, whether in college, high school, or even in their early pro career that's non NBA? What would you tell them is like a truth that you need to really like wrap your mind around this?
Yeah, like you can never get comfortable is the thing that I would say. Is I think a lot of people, I talk to guys all the time who are like, I'm gonna play pro basketball. It's like, you don't understand like how hard it is to play professional basketball. I mean, I played 5 years, and I feel like I should have played 10. Right? Everybody always feels
Right, right.
they should have done more, could have done more, and um, I was my own agent for 4 of those 5 years too. So, I was trying to figure out and navigate. So if anybody understands like how difficult it is, it's me. And, just understand you can never get comfortable, because no matter what school you played at or what you've done, it's like you have to continue to prove yourself. It's a nonstop process. So if you have a good rookie year, great. You're going to get your second job, or you're going to get more time your second year, but you have to keep proving yourself over and over and over again. And I would say to college coaches too, was like, go educate yourself. Go educate yourself on the European leagues. Go educate yourself on the NBA process, and empower these guys. Give them good information. Empower them. Allow them to make the decisions. It's like, don't try and control the process and make it about you. And I know there's frustration there, because you have all these different people in their ears telling them how good they are and what they should and what they shouldn't do. But I genuinely believe that players are receptive when you give them good information and you lay it out and you empower them, and you're not trying to sway them, or you're not trying to influence them in a way. Because again, guys are getting smarter, and they're starting to understand that, okay, is this guy saying this just because like he wants me to come back to school, or is he doing this because it's actually in my best interest? And I think it's like, start from the beginning, start from the very beginning, from the recruiting process on, and start giving them information, dig up as much stuff as you can. I'm happy to be a resource for anybody on that kind of thing as well, where it's like, empower these guys, and ultimately they're gonna, more times than not, make the right decision. And you're not gonna have to all of a sudden be in panic mode trying to tell them, oh, this, because then it's like they're gonna put the wall up and be defensive. But just educating, empowering, and one thing I'd love to do in the future is have more of these guys come back to college campuses and talk about it, because
Mm,
a lot of times players need to hear from other players.
right, right. So much truth in that when you hear from somebody who's lived it and somebody who's lived it in that uniform. Definitely, definitely accurate on that. And I think just, and you touched on it in several different times in several different ways throughout this, but what you talked about just now with um, the empowerment, right? I think that in order to really be empowered, you have to have some truth and some education and some open mindedness to what do I not know, right? Because there is a space that if I don't know this, and if I end up knowing it and acquire this knowledge and have this reality, right? There's what I think you said it earlier. There's your reality, the player's reality, and then there's reality, right?
Yeah,
So
and it's all gotta be. If it's not the same, then you're doomed.
right. Really hard to be empowered. So, no, we'll end, man. We so appreciate you sharing all that you have today, man. It's been awesome. Like I said, it's Christmas Day for me. I don't know if I'm getting any other presents, but this is present enough, man. But yeah, just kind of share. We like to end with legacy question. What do you want? We're all writing our own story. You know, that's
Yeah.
something we talk about,
Yeah.
something we believe in, and want to empower. We want to empower our listeners to understand. Like you get an opportunity to write your story. Like you're not a victim. You're not subject to this or that. And no matter what happens, you're still writing it. So, what would you say you want your legacy to be as you continue to write your story?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on it earlier. Is like I want to be seen as a servant leader. Like I want people to look on me and be like, "Hey, he helped and connected, and um, because of his involvement in my life, my life was better." I mean, I want to be able to impact people, and um, obviously, specifically the niche is athletes, but I also think now too, um, because I have this platform as an agent, and now all of a sudden, here I am 5 years later. I'm because you have some NBA players. All of a sudden now, people see you as like, oh, you know, you're an NBA agent, um, but also being someone that remembered like where I came from and who I was, and I had a conversation with a kid, Division II kid yesterday. Just like, look, man, I don't think that I can necessarily help you, but send me your stuff. I'll put it in my database, and I'll be a resource for you if I can answer any questions or help you in any way. So just like staying true to that and not getting caught up in the hype and not getting caught up in the business.
That's good, man. That's good. Tell us, congratulations too. I didn't say this at the beginning. I should have on a newborn. How do you juggle the family life, and how much fun are you having with your four little ones at home?
Well, you gotta repeat that. I cut out for a second.
No, I was saying I didn't congratulate you on your newborn.
Oh
The
yeah, thank you,
new
thank
push
you.
me for the family, and with this crazy busy Asian life, man, we'll just end with a family touch of how do you balance it all, and how much do you love? I know how much you love being a father, but just share that role too and how that fits in. Can you hear me still?
I lost you.
No, I was just saying share the family touch of your newborn being
Oh,
a father. How does that fit into the whole equation, and how do you balance that
I
too?
mean, I heard newborn, so I mean, yeah. Making sure, I guess, in the craziness of this business is also too just making sure that I'm present, and I'm the best husband, I'm the best father that I can possibly be.
Yep, that's good, man. That's good. Well, appreciate it again, Kush. Thanks so much, man, and look forward to more great things to come.